Alright, I think we might as well start. Starting off with basic stuff. HTML and CSS are pretty much the bare bones structure of anything you're going to do in the future at Lambda. So it's really important to be able to work with HTML and CSS because all of your styling and all of your structure for your apps are going to be made using it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to create a new project from scratch, show you some extensions, really good to use, and pretty much get you in the workflow, you know. It is a process with learning. It always is, but you just got to put in some work and you'll definitely pick it up. And luckily, the backbone structure of being a developer is pretty easy. I think you'll pick up HTML and CSS faster than any other concept. So let's start off with making a directory. This is the same thing as just clicking on new folder, but I do it through the command. You'll get used to it after so many times committing to GitHub or whatever. So I'm gonna make a HTML CSS practice folder, and as you can see, it's right there. So yeah, it just makes a folder. Let's just open that up. And I did have a project open a second ago, my bad. So here it is, our empty folder. Now we're gonna start off up here, but there is an extension I'll show you guys in a minute, and I'm gonna have it on the right side so everyone can see. But let's start off by making an HTML file. On most times you're gonna see it called index.html. When you get into React, you'll actually see that your entire React application is put in the body of your HTML document. So you can have other pages. That's how you route around with a basic website, but for now we're just making one page. So here you are. Start off, you can have extensions like this. It's called emit, and see, it put all this here for me, but we're not going to do that. So this, you want to start off by telling the browser what type of document you're using, and so it's going to be an HTML document, and then all of your documents going to be wrapped in these HTML tags right here. Basically, everything inside of the HTML, in between these two brackets right here, are your elements, and this is your parent. So think of it as a tree. And we'll talk more about the DOM, a document object model. But for now, we're just looking at the basic structure. So every page has a header, and I'll show you what that looks like real quick. The header is this right here. Part of it. Here's where the title goes. So if we put in a title, and let's just call it Intro to HTML and CSS. And I think that is the perfect time to show you the extension. So I do use a lot of extensions. You'll just find them as you start to work on different things, and you'll find stuff that meets your needs. But first of all, live server. This makes it so every time you make a change, you don't have to reopen this HTML file. It's automatically going to update. So once you install it, you might have to restart your code editor, well, VS Code, but you'll see this little thing when you right click, open with live server. So if we do that, it's going to open up in a whole new page right here. And look at that, our title is Intro to HTML and CSS. And so the other types of things you would put in here are meta tags. And meta tags are basically things that define your document. So your initial viewport size, which is this whole area right here, the initial scale of it. You'll have things like SEO, which search engine optimization. Anything that you want to have like tags or a title for Google search results, you would put them in meta tags inside of your header. This is the stuff you can't see. So unlike here, this is where all of your content goes. Unlike here, if I type anything in there, it shows up in the body. But this, well, you're like, well, that's just text, why isn't it showing up? It's because it's inside of the header, and it's a title inside of the header, which only goes there. Another thing you'll do inside the head is link style sheet files to your document, but we'll get into that after HTML. So here we are. So every tag, or what you want to do is, I can put text in here and it shows up, but when you go to style, there's nothing to identify these pieces. I can't do anything to that right now because there's no tag, there's no identifiers. So it's always good to wrap everything in a tag, and this is an H1, and it stands for heading element. And the 1, as you'll see, there's H2. So if we do this, heading, if we do this, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we make the headers different sizes, and you'll see this show up in a second, but there's heading 1 through 6, and the bigger the number, the smaller the heading. So you see that? So this is a heading 6 right here. Let's put a 6 there to differentiate it. You can't see it there. There's a zoom in real quick. See, so it's, the browser has default styles for each of these tags by default. So if you're in Firefox, it might be different. If you're in Safari, it might be different. And that applies to things like buttons, and that's why they look differently on different browsers if somebody didn't default style them. But that's our first set. And P, if you can guess, paragraph tag. So what I just did right there was I just used a quick extension that creates Lorem Ipsum for me. But let's say we wanted something bigger. Oh. So even bigger. But these have the default mode of a paragraph. The wrapping, things like that, that's default for paragraph tags. When you do it as a heading, it's meant to be a one-line text. So it would come out to here and never start to wrap because it's meant to be a heading. We have other things. Button. Click the, and look at that, a button. No functionality yet, but there is a button. Now, when you start to style these things, there's not much structure right now. If we try to shrink this down, it does wrap, but when you make more complex designs, that's not going to work like that. So let's say this is a section. These types of tags are very semantic because it tells you exactly what's going on over there. You can use a div, which is the most common, but you want to make sure that your content is wrapped elements most of the time, if you can. And basically semantic just means it has a meaning to it. So something like div, there's not much meaning in the word div. But if you say section, it's the same thing, but it's semantic, has meaning to it. So if we take this, in a header we want, a header is usually something up here, or it's a sidebar. More common though, it's a nav bar. So let's make a nav bar. Let's say we want a big H1 that says our logo, okay? And then we want links, hashtag. So an A tag is an anchor, and an anchor is any type of link you'll click on a website. So the href is where you're going to be going to. So if we say HTTPS, and this is just the, sorry, I got a new keyboard and it puts question marks instead. So that should take us to Google. Oh, my bad. You do close this one. Every tag has a beginning and the ending tag, bracket, slash, the tag name, and a closing bracket. So anything inside of the end of that bracket and the start of that bracket means it's inside of this tag. So look at that, it says Google. And you click on it, it takes us to google.com. And when you have things that are inside of the same website, if you want to take them somewhere else in your website, if we had a page called about.html, we would just do that, click on it, and it would take us to a file called about.html, but we do not have one. So we can call that one about. Copy that a few times. Contact, pricing, and let's say privacy. So here we have our little nav bar, and you might see this on any normal website. When you're clicking on a bunch of links, like their about page or whatever, you'll see that a lot. And right here is the basic structure of that. So let's say we're done with our header, right? We'll get into silence soon, don't worry. So another semantic tag, I like to use section a lot. I think it represents what I'm trying to do a lot more often. The only time I use a div tag is I'm trying to break something up in here. So if I wanted these two to be their own group, I would wrap them in their own div. But for big content sections, I like to use section or footer, header, etc. So if we come here and let's say we want a big article, and let's say welcome to our site, and I am so sorry. Common rule of thumb is for search engines, they look for your big H1 tags, along with a combination of other things. But if you keep using H1, it's going to mess up basically when somebody searches for your website, it's not going to be so concise. So you have a ton of headers, and so Google's looking at it like, okay, what headers are these? Take a P here. Take that and let's say Lorab 50. That's a paragraph. That's a good paragraph right there. And let's say we want a big welcome image. This is a new tag. And to make an image, it's IMG. And to tell it what image, it's SRC for source. And this one closes itself. You don't need the ending bracket for this one. And I know it might seem like a lot right now, but you will definitely get used to this. Alt tag. So the alt tag is basically for if an image doesn't load, this text will be in its place. So the user has something to look at, and it's not just a not found picture icon. You don't want that. That's very ugly. At the same time, screen readers can read this text for people who can't see. It'll read the text that you put in. So if you're not putting alt tags, you're not caring about the accessibility of somebody handicapped or who can't see. It's really helpful for them to have screen reader support on your website, and it's really important to employers. So let's get a dog image, a nice cute puppy. So if we copy that, so you have two different options here. Cat image. I'm going to show both. So the first one, we'll make it the dog image, and we'll post it. We'll type in the exact URL of that photo that I copied. I'll just say it's a dog image. If we come over here, there it is. If you look at the address, it takes you to the address we put it. But you have another option, and usually you want to create an images folder. It's really important to be managing your files, but let's actually download this image. So let's save it as a JPEG in my pictures. Cat. Let's throw that in our images folder. So you'll see it's right there, cat.jpg. So if we take another image, and it is in the images folder. / basically just goes up one, or it's in your current directory. I'm sorry. So your current directory, CSS, HTML CSS practice / images / cat.jpg. And let's add a little alt tag, and this is a cat. Look at that. Now if we look at the image address for this, it's showing our website, and right now since we're on a local place, it's showing the IP / images / cat.jpg, because when we're hosting this whole project, it'll be our website, and those folders and files will be posted on that website. So that's two ways to do an image. So So we got these two nice images here, cat and a dog. Let's say we wanted to make another section, and we wanted what else should we add to our site? Let's add a footer. A footer is usually what you'll see at the bottom of a website. They might have something like privacy policy or support or contact links, but it's basically just another nav bar, glorified nav bar. So if we take maybe an H3. Oh, sorry, no. You can take let's add that. Let's call this one privacy policy. And we'll just assign it, basically the hashtag is just an empty link, but that's okay. Come down here, it's our footer and privacy policy. And let's just add a copyright 2020 what Nathaniel Richards. Look at that. And yes, this is very ugly, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with being a little bit ugly. I know I am. No, sorry, just wanted to make sure the stream was still up. Just 1 second. Right, so take that, and I think we need to start adding a little bit of style. So we'll start introducing CSS. So just call this one style if you want. A lot of people say root styles or whatever, but style.css is usually the most common, and it has to end with .css because it's a CSS file. Let's make that. And now we can get into selectors, which will bring in why it's important to have tags. So everything's inside of our body, and if you go to inspect on our page here, look at that, there's our head. Everything's wrapped in our HTML file, and if you hover over each part, there's our H2 inside of a section. Close that, go to our footer, there's the A inside of our footer. If you look at those little tags down there, it was right around here. Those are our selectors. And here it shows our styles. We haven't put any styles there yet. We're about to. So if we take this and we say, let's add a class to our header. So this will add a selector, and classes can be used multiple times throughout your document, as many times as you want, really. Something really helpful to use for classes is when you're making a bunch of buttons. You gotta make a ton of buttons, but they all need to look the exact same, just different text. You can just make a class called btn big, a big button, and every button you want on that page, you can add button big to it. So let's just make this our header. So if we go to header, so default tags in HTML can be selected just as they are, H2, but that selects all of them on the page. It doesn't select just one. So like for image example, if we set a width of 500 pixels or of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels, and we do have to link that. Link relevance equals a style sheet. and the href equals style.css right there, and that is a self-closing tag. And look at that, as soon as I saved it, it took these two styles, but it changed both of our images, and we don't want to change everything on the page with the same tag, because when you have giant websites, that's going to start backfiring. So if you want to have one header on the page, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal. But let's say we want our header to have a border of 1 pixel. We want it to be solid, and we want it to be red. And this is really helpful for debugging. I usually debug everything with borders when I'm writing CSS, because it makes everything so much easier to visualize what you're doing. And let's give the body a margin of 0. If you see that, let's take that away. There's a margin. Margins on all sides. The bottom, left, right, and top. And that's by default in HTML. And making a website, that's just by default. But you can just remove that by setting the margin to 0. So we want it right to the edge. I usually do margin 0, but I add a padding of 2%. And look at that, did the same thing. But if we add a border of 1 pixel, solid green, sorry, the green border is exactly to the edges, and they just put padding, which is the spacing from the outside box to the inside. This makes it pretty uniform styling for everything. Usually want to set margin to 0. At least I do in all my projects. I like to usually use a reset, so all of the styles go to default. But if we take this, and let's say we want these and these on the exact same line. So if we come over here, and they're, like I said before, now we have our header here messing our flow up, because headers want their own line naturally, and you see, headers want their own line. But what we can do is we can select the H1 inside of header, and we can say we want this to display inline block. And look at that, now it's changing its default way of actions and saying, okay, I guess I can take these in on the same line. There's all the space here, but you know. But it's kind of close. So something you can do to create spacing is, let's take our H1, and let's add a margin to the right of the H1 that says our logo. Let's say 10 pixels. You see? So now it's 10 pixels apart. And let's say we want 50 pixels. 200 pixels. So now it's more to the side. And you'll see very soon, as you get more into CSS, that that does not really resize correctly. When you start to use pixels, and now it's a full site, look at that. That doesn't look normal. That's not how we designed it to be. We wanted it to be to the edge or whatever. It looks completely different on every browser, and that's really the hard part. Something I didn't enjoy was responsive design. I think it's so boring, but it's okay. It's very important for development. So if we take, let's work on our section, and since we only have one section on the page, I'm gonna leave it selector as section. But let's say we have this special paragraph right here, and we don't want to select it any other way. We can say it. We can give it an ID, and an ID is meant to be used once. So let's give it a special name. ID, we want paragraph top. And so if I It's not meant to be put on something else. So this is not supposed to be. Never do that. I strongly advise you to use an ID once. An ID is a much stronger selector than a class because it's so specific. And how to select that is a hashtag. What did we call it? A paragraph top. So I'm just going to copy that. And I don't know if that's big enough for you guys. There we go. Look at that. So the hashtag and then the name. And then our brackets. And let's say we want the color to be... Pretty sure that's this one. Yeah, this one. So let's get a red or a purple hex color. If you guys have any experience with design or Photoshop, this is how you would put custom colors. So as you can see, here's my color picker. When I scroll over this blue, that's hashtag 4495DC. You're not required to memorize these. I don't think anyone I know memorizes these. There's an endless possibility of colors. We can say this though. And look at that. Something you might find is, so if we take this one, and let's say we declare this again as an RGB version, you know what's going to show up? The purple, because this one was the last one to be declared. It starts here, it's like, okay, set the color to that, and so it's that. Goes to the next line. Oh, it got changed. It re-changes it. And I'm pretty sure this, yeah. So if you see here, there's a strike through the first color that we specified because it got canceled out. That's what that strike means. And again, that's just right click, inspect your page. So that's that paragraph. Let's say we want to just make a selector for class though. So class equals image 1. So you wouldn't usually make this a class. So let's say this one is the footer bottom, right? So to select a class name, footer bottom brackets. So you put the dot and then the name. So that's selecting this whole section now. So let's say we want it to be, we want it to have a height of 150 pixels. See? So if we add a border to it, border 5 pixels or 2 pixels dashed yellow or purple. Jeez, I cannot type it. That is the footer bottom section itself and the elements that are put into it. And it has a height of 150 pixels. So that's good, I guess. That's a lot of room though. So you might want to take it down to 75 pixels. That's enough for the content for us. We're not doing anything responsive yet, so that's enough. And there's the dashed. So the dashed added that instead of a solid border like these, we now have a dash. And this is another good way to show our padding example. So let's give it 10 pixels of padding. See, so the padding affects, instead of, if we said margin, it would move the entire box. Instead, we use padding and it moves the items inside of it. So it adds a padding around all of the inside content. So this is a good start for layout. Basically, every element inside of your HTML is a node. It's called the DOM, the Document Object Model. And the DOM is the tree of elements that represent your HTML file. And that's what these selectors are. when you make a selector, it goes to it, tries to find it on your page. It's like, oh, hey, we found one. So, finds it, looks good. And I want these two images right here. I want them side by side. So let's add a image class. Class equals image. Class equals image. Let's take those out of there. You don't have to do this, but just wrap them in a div. So make sure they're inside of their own div. Let's add a class to that called image container. So let's select that dot image container because it's class, and we made another one dot image. Yes. So we're gonna change the default display to inline block, but it looks like this one's a little bit too big. So let's just set a width for both of them. Let's say 100 pixels. Maybe that's a little small. 300 pixels. There we go. And if you don't specify a height, it will make an auto height and won't stretch it. Because see, if we made a height of 100 pixels, see, it starts to stretch them out. But if you just leave that auto, it's just an auto fit. So we got our first little site going. Why don't we add some more to it? So let's say under our footer here, we wanted a contact form or something. Or no, this is a good time to see our contact.html. So let's set this up, and it's going to be doc type HTML. Everything's going to be inside of an HTML tag. Sorry, HTML. Jeez, I cannot type today. And let's set up our header, and let's add a title of contact, and add our body, and we're just gonna put a placeholder for now called contacts page. And let's actually take this and we'll put that up here, contact page. As you can see, there's nothing showing up yet. That's completely normal. So like here, let's change contact to contact.html. And look at that. Oh. Huh. Let's change that. Change that. Change that. And let's take this back to here. Do the same. Now if we're going to contact, look at that. Contact.html. Complete separate file. And if we wanted to change this to home and set it to index.html and went here and did the same. Now, from whatever page we're at, contact, home, oh my gosh, don't ask me again. And so that's linking inside of your file structure to different pages. Let's say we wanted our contact page to be some type of dark theme to it. So let's link our style or contact page to our style sheet as well. could do a whole new style sheet, but it's just easier to do one big style sheet sometimes, especially when you're just starting off. And let's say we want our contact page to have a class of contact page. Let's change that to an ID, be more specific. And if we come down here and we select a hashtag for ID, contact page, let's make the entire background. Making a background on something, you can do background or background dash color. It's the exact same thing, almost. And let's just set that to black. It's real nice black. Look at that. But let's set all of our colors to white so we can start to see everything. Let's say we want this to be our dark page. And I'm gonna do something right now. Go back to contact, and let's say we want a big section here, and this is gonna be our form to contact us. Let's remove that background and the color. Make it much easier to see it. So let's add a input. So this is an input. And if you go to input, W3, input, W3 schools, pretty sure that's what it is. This is super helpful website. Shows you all the different types of tags and what they can do. So these are types of inputs you could do. So what we can do is, let's start with a text box. So you wrap it in a form. Usually when you submit the form, if it's wrapped in a form tag, it'll automatically handle the submission in whatever you put up here. So on submit, right? And then you could say you wanted to do whatever, right? And you'll see that in React a lot, but let's add a type to it. And one over here, text. This is the default, so, but I'm gonna put it just so you can see it. And this does not close itself. Or, wow, it does close itself. And let's add a label. And let's call this name. And like that. When you put a label inside of a form next to an input, it kind of sets it up perfectly for you. But that's really getting too close for me, personally. So let's take our form. Let's add a margin top of 25 pixels. Give that a little bit of space for us. Let's take another one. Another thing to add is, you might see the gray text that's usually in here, right? So that is called a placeholder, and you can just set it to whatever. So full name, and that's gonna give that placeholder effect for you. Or you could even do an example, you know, like John Doe. You'll see that a lot more common. Let's make an input, give it a type of number, and let's add another label for it. Let's say this one's called age. Look at that. You can't type. I'm typing letters right now, and you can't because you set its type to default to number. And this is a good example for type equals password. This will have the default way of acting with it, where it hides your password. See that I don't have to do anything. And when you set it as a type of password, those things like save password stuff, those are automatically recognized in your browser because you told the browser this is a password field right here. And let's add a button at the end. Submit. And when you put a button at the end of your form like this, it will submit. It will call that on submit logic for the form. It's automatically induced there. Look at that. So we got our submit button, and you see how that refreshes the entire page, because the default submit logic for a form is to refresh the page and do something, but nothing happened. So that's our form. I can even add a big H2 for it and say contact or sign up form / contact. We kind of made it into a sign up form. That's okay though. So let's add another section, and let's call this one, what could we go through here? So many tags. I guess we can go through lists. So let's say, so there's two different types of lists. An ordered list, OL, and an unordered list, but we'll start with the ordered list. So if we put item 1, we put a few of these here, 2, 3. That's gonna number those automatically because it's inside of an ordered list. If we do the same thing, but we make it a UL unordered list, there's just gonna have the default style of the bullet points. So that's lists. So you might have like a to-do list or something of the sort, and then that's what that's gonna do pretty much. It's just the default styling for it. Do you want numbers? Do you want bullet points? Let's go a little bit more down, and let's say, what else could we do here? Let me see. Let's say we wanted to import a font or use a font style. So let's make a big H3 and let's give it an ID of wants font. This one wants the font. So we're gonna say using a new font. That's gonna go there for now. As you can see, it's just the default. I think it's like a sans serif or something. But this is something this is what most people use is, Google Fonts. Easiest way to implement a new font. I've never seen this one before, but we could try this one. So if you go here, you can select which ones you want. So let's say regular, a medium, and a bold. If we say embed, it's going to give us a link. So we can do it one of two ways. So we can say it here, another link to a font, and this will work. So if we go here, this is how they want you to define it. So what was it called? Wants font. So hashtag wants font. And we're going to set its font family to the name of the font we just imported. Look at that. It's using this one right here, Museo Moderno, just like we put it. But let's say we wanted to comment that out. So sorry for not showing you how to make comments, but it's a bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash, and I do have autocomplete, so it put these here. But see, now it's comment. You got to end it with that. That's how you make comments. So anything you put in there isn't going to show up. See, see the font went away. Now it's just using the default, which is why we said a default option right here. If we don't add the font, use that. But if you go back to here, there's an import option. If we import at the top of our file here, import the font right in the CSS. Look at that, back to normal. So that's the second way of using that. And another thing I might show you real quick, a style tag here. So just like that, we can select the labels, and let's give it a color of red. Oh, red. So this is another way to do styles. If you don't want to make a new style sheet and then link it, you can do styles inside of a style start and end tag inside of the head. We're just going to remove that. So that's a way to import a new font. I think I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more CSS. Alright, we're back. Okay, so this isn't the only type of as you can see, our page is very normal looking, if you'd say. So let's actually put some of this knowledge into effect here. So I'm going to delete everything inside of our body on index.html. I'm going to delete contact.html and go back to where we started. I'm also going to remove all of the styling here. And to start off, let's go get ourselves a nice font. And I'm not going to make this too crazy advanced, but good enough. One of the fonts I really like is Montersat. Yep, there we go. Montersat. Another good one, really popular for marketing pages right now. So when you get to your first build, this might be helpful. Poppins. I just worked with a client a few weeks ago and made his entire thing in Poppins. Well, not the entire thing, but most of it in Poppins. And the first time I had used it, and I was like, wow, this is freaking awesome font. Really matched the bubbly, rounded theme. So we're going to add a regular, a medium, and a bold. And we'll get more into font weights in a second here. I'm just going to do it the classic. I'm just going to show the classic link tag version of it. Whoops. So we got our style sheet, and let's declare the body to have a font family of Poppins. That's gonna set everything by default to be Poppins, anything inside of our body here. And let's start with a header. Sorry, jeez, can't get it together today. And we're gonna make a nav, and the HTML nav tag, I forgot to use it in the beginning of the video, but that's where you'll put these. That's the semantic version of your HTML, like your navigation tags. So let's make a nav. Let's maybe give it a logo, and let's make it a coffee logo. Make a little coffee shop. Save image as coffee. And remember, you can do a link by just copying the image address, but I like to just download it and throw it in my images there. So let's get an image and set its source to ./images/coffee.png. Alt tag coffee shop logo. Oh yeah, and that's way too big, but that's okay. We can add an ID here, and let's just say it's a logo. And if we come over here, hashtag logo, height of 50%, and percent's basically that's gonna set the picture to 50% of its parent's height. So if we take our header here and we'll set that with a height of 200 pixels, it's going to be 50%, or it should be. Border 1 pixel solid red. Yeah, so it's going to take up 50% of its parent. So if you highlight that, that shows what bounds that is. So we might even want it a little bit smaller, 25%. That's perfect. And that nav is way too large. So let's wait to resize that until we get our nav right. So let's say, what, 100 pixels? Nope, too big. 75 pixels? Too big. I'd say 45 pixels is right in the sweet spot. And I don't think we need to add a height to that at all now. Yeah, we do. There we go. So let's just say 100% of this specific container. We don't want it to go anywhere else. And there's our little logo here. Inside of our nav, let's add a few links. So let's say hashtag for that. And let's say this one's gonna be home. That's where we are right now. So let's set it to index.html. And let's add another one to hashtag and close that off with about. We can just take that one. Contact. And let's say this one's our locations. So let's grab that. We want the nav that's inside of the header. And we want that to have a width of 50% of the header container. So let's take our solid red. Let's just take this. See, now they're not even in there right now. But if we take our nav and we say display inline block, that might fix it. Yes. They're a little off-centered. It's much different doing a layout without the new Flexbox and CSS grid. So not necessarily new, but Flexbox, it's basically a bunch of CSS properties that allow you to align rows and columns, as you can see. And I was trying not to worry about it too much right now. But for example, you could set the header to be a flex container. Okay. So to look at that already, we can remove that, and now it's already lined up. So if we want to justify our content to a center, that takes everything and puts it right there in the center. But we also see these are like at the top of the image there. So if we set align items to center as well, that aligns everything to the very middle. And to be a more traditional NAD, we can say we want to justify the content to have space between. And look at that. Very nice. Padding. No. Let's say we want our nav to take up 75% and we want to align self. This is just going to align this section right here of items. Flex end. No, I knew it. I always get these messed up, but let's add a new border to it. A lot of times, even after doing it for so long, I mess up with my CSS and I'm like, okay, well, why isn't this doing what I want? Let's just align center for these. Let's set it back to 50%, maybe even 45%. And these are the default colors. And underline, we don't want that. It's ugly. So we can say it's flex. We want this nav section to be a flex as well, and we want to justify those with space around. And look at that. That puts space. So there's space here, space here, space here, space here, and space there. And the border of that is around here. It's okay if you don't get the Flexbox yet. It's no biggie. let's say we want to set the color to black. Sorry. We have to set or select the A tag. So let's say we want color to be black. So that set those. Maybe even a gray. And you can remove the underline. So if you say text decoration is none, we don't want any of those. Now we got these. If you wanted to do some type of hover, I think we can skip that for now. I don't think, I think it's too early on for that. But if we go back to our index, we got our nav already, so we can remove that border. That's great. Look at that, already looking great. So if we take this, let's make a section, and let's give it an ID of main content or something. Let's close that off. Let's set up a selector, hashtag, because of it's an ID, main content. Oh, hey Ismail, I think that's how you're saying your name. How's it going? So main content, and let's say we want, what should we have here? We want maybe like a landing type setup. So let's make a div here, and like I said, div's not usually used for big sections, but this is just a portion of semantic section, so that's okay. So let's say div, we want big H1 that says welcome to Northwest Coffee, and we want a paragraph right in that says lorem 30. So that should be a nice size paragraph. And let's say we wanted an image to the right of that though. So what we can do, so you can make an image, set the source. So let's go to Unsplash. Unsplash is another great website for just getting image URLs instead of downloading them. Oh yeah, for sure. I think you're literally the only person watching it, but that's alright. What even category is this? Pink? Oh, these are just the most popular today. Okay. Let's look up something like coffee. Oh yeah. Some nice coffee beans for our landing right here. And remember, give it an alt, just by habit. Coffee beans. And remember, the alt is to describe what the image is. Look at that. Came up way too large, and that's okay. We want to set a bounding box to this entire section here, but we have yet to. So let's take this image, and I actually think I want this on top of our content here. So let's take this, and remember our selector here, main content. Let's give it a width of 100%. So and let's say the image inside of main content, we want it to have a width of 100% as well. Look at that. So that's going to fit that. And that's a nice little header for us. As you can see though, everything has a little bit of margin. We don't really like that. So you can always start by trying to do it that way. But as you can see, the margin's set on our body. So we would have to come to here, 0 auto. So that's going to set everything to the bounding edges of the box. but we can always do, for each section, you can always do a little bit of padding here and there. Let's say our main content, we want it to be a little padding of like 1%. Oh, now it's gonna take the image. We will do that on a different. So if we select this content right here, and that was the div inside of main content, so we select it like that, the container it's in, to be more specific, and then even more specific than that, what we're trying to target. And let's say we want it to have a padding of 2%. Look at that. So that text will no longer go to the edges of its parent. And that's nice. It's something, I usually set this immediately when working on a project, but something that happens, if we look up what it does, border box. See, so if you don't set it to border box and it starts to shrink, it will go outside of the parent. But if you set it to border box, it'll always contain inside the parent. So that's usually something a lot of people just set right off the bat because they use paddings a lot, and that's okay. Now this header is very nice, but I want to show you guys a border or bottom shadow. Box shadow is, I'll tell you right now, I don't know anybody who makes box shadows from scratch. Something I have always used, to be honest, is a box shadow maker here. So we want it like that. You can set it like this. So if you go to our nav, add a box shadow to it, adds that shadow. If you take this and put it on the entire header, there'll be a little box shadow there. You can't see it right now though, so let's add a margin of 10 pixels. And there's that little box shadow, but that is very ugly. So we're gonna remove that. And we can remove that margin again. What did I just delete? Oh, there we go. There we go, so it's back to normal. But sometimes the box shadow is very helpful for things like buttons. Again, that's just cssmatic.com/box-shadow. I don't think I've ever made a box shadow from scratch, but that would be the setup. Each corner of the box, or each section of the box shadow, the color, and the opacity of it with RGBA. That's something you don't really need to get into right now. We can close that out and close that out. This is kind of big. This is perfectly fine, but let's say we want to add a little bit more color to it. So let's say we wanted that same color brown. So I have a CSS picker, or a color picker extension. You can literally just type in color picker and then your browser. I'm using Brave, so it's also a Google Chrome extension. They're the same for both. So we got our color code here. So let's say we want to access the H1, or no, yeah, the H1 inside of main content. Or did I make that an H2? Nope, made an H1. And let's set the color of that text to our new code that we got. And look at that, that's nice and cute. Nice little color there. And if you remember, we had some font weights. We selected the 400 size, 500 size, and 700 size. So we can test some of those out. 400 looks like that. 500 was the medium, I think, and a 700 was super thick. I really like the 700 for, I like the bold for headers, make it stand out more. And we can actually do something a little bit different. For the text. So we're selecting the P inside of main content. All P tags, by the way, so make sure if you're putting more than one, add a selector for it. But because we only have one, I'm just selecting it just like that, and that's okay. So as you can see, it's kind of we have two things. It's cluttered, very short line spacing. We're going to change that. And we can change the font weight, picking from 4, 5, and 7, because those are the ones we selected. So the color does not look black, but I just want to make sure. I mean, is there a difference here? I guess so. It looks the exact same. So let's try a font weight of 500 and see how that looks. Too bold. I think 400 will be just fine. And let's give it a font size of, let's say, 16 pixels. 11 pixels. See, so you can go down. A lot of people say 12 pixels is just enough for the base font of your website. I tend to go with 16, but I think 14 is right there in the sweet spot. It's already looking better. So you can add a line spacing or a line height of, let's say, 2, 5. So if you look now, there's 5 spacing in between these. 50 pixels. I'm not sure. I don't think that works. I think it's just individual numbers. I've never had to use pixels. I don't think it's an option. Let's say 2. 2 is usually the base line height, but 2.5 looks a lot better for this. Let's scroll more down. And let's say we wanted a divider between our sections here. And that's going to be HR, and this closes itself. HRs make these width-based lines right under wherever you put them. So wherever you put them, they will make this line. And there is properties that you can change that. But I think for our site, we probably don't need that. That's okay. We can, in fact, add another section here. And we can call this one our footer. And we can add a, let's say, add another nav tag, semantic. And we can actually just take those right there. Take one of them, I think, and we can say privacy policy or privacy policy. Take that again, duplicate it, and we can call that one careers. You know, that's the type of stuff you'll usually see on footers. So let's go outside of the nav and let's put a P that says copyright 2020 Nathaniel Richards. See, so we're gonna want to adjust the positioning of those elements as well. So if we go to footer, and see, this is where you're gonna see our items styling get crossed out here. So let's go to our footer. Let's open up our nav. Our nav is inheriting the properties we set And here I'm pretty sure, or no, it is inheriting the A. The A is inheriting these because we selected all A tags on the page. But if we come down here, since it runs from top to bottom, we're going to override those styles if we change anything about the color, font size, etc. So let's select the entire footer first. Let's give it a width of 100%, 100% from corner to corner. We want a background color of, I think this same brown would be very nice. And margin of 0. We got a little bit of section here. I think I thought I put a section footer. Well, we have a little bit extra space in here. That can be fixed with CSS, but I'm not going to spend all day on that today. So, let's say we want all these items to be in a row here. So let's set it to a flex container. We want to make sure everything is centered, but we also want everything to be on the same axis. So like that. And let's say we want evenly. So even space between there, there, there. And let's say we want to select the footer P tag, and we want that to be, or we can probably just do it in here. Let's say the font size for all this is 10 pixels. Nice. And we want the color for all of it to be gray. So look at that. And if we go to our nav, these are very close together. So we can select the nav inside of the footer, and we can say we want this to take up 50% of this entire footer. So if we add a border to this right now, 1 pixel dashed border, that's the color orange. Look at that, that's taking up 50%, still with the space evenly between them all. And we don't want that. So we can say 30%, and we want this to also be a flex container. And we also want this to be able to justify the content evenly. So if we remove that right there now, they're separated, but these are its own container from here to here, this box here. So if you go in here and you take a selector, this is the box, that's the nav, this is the footer, it's that width and height. The nav is inside of the footer, and it's that big, so it's justifying the content inside of that width. This is the BP section, and there's the spacing in between each one. If we come down here to our nav, our A tag, see, we overrode the color of gray, I think, yeah. We selected the A tag of color of gray, so that actually overrode our color gray that we selected, because we never specifically selected the A tag again. And so the priority was put on the original A tag that we selected all of them. So if we wanted to fix that, you could just say footer A, then a color, and that would override that. So look at that. We have our first little site here. Oh, I see your comments. Cool. So we can do another section, try to get some work on some forms, So let's make a new file, and we can call this one about or contact.html, and let's make the contact one on the index contact.html. So whenever we click on that, it's gonna go there. We don't have anything in there right now, but it's okay. So remember, doc type HTML. Everything's gonna be going inside HTML tags. We need our head with a title in it, and that's gonna be a, let's say, about, or what was it, contact. Yes. I'm losing my head today. And let's relink both of these style sheets here, or just this style sheet, that's fine, as well as the font. So technically you could have just copied this and then deleted everything inside of the body, but that's okay. This will be uploaded afterwards to my YouTube channel, so if you want to rewatch it or see a specific part, I'll probably try to look through and grab some timestamps for it. Oh, thanks. It actually turned out way better than I thought. I'm a terrible designer usually. So we're here on our contact now, but we want to take, because we have not gotten to JavaScript yet, we actually have to copy and paste over these components here. We're not using any type of framework to do it. So let's make our body tag, set that header in there, and when we go to contact, we should still have that. Look at that. Nice. So on both pages we have that header, and because we linked our same style sheet here, it can look for those same styles we set on these things already. So let's make a new section here, and let's say we want a big H1, so that when you search for a page on Google, it's gonna pull up this title of the page, and it's like, so coffee shop name contact page. And since our H1 is referring to big title that says contact, and it's inside of the page that says, hey, this is this website, the description, so they'll link those together and take you to their contact page. So let's say contact. Now let's actually go there to start. That'd be helpful. Contact. And let's add a new class name to this, or ID, sorry. We want it to be more specific since we're starting to get more files. So let's say contact container. We can come over to styles, and remember, if you want to select an ID, it's hashtag, and then our brackets. And we want this entire we want this to have 2% padding here. Look at that. So now we have some padding on the top.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Hey, thanks for subscribing. Forgot I had that on. So if we look at our main content, we put 2% padding on it, just like that. So we have a padding on it now. Let's add some content to it. Sorry. Let's say we want to make a new div. This is gonna, sorry, no div. Let's make a form. Just remember, we want to wrap our form elements inside of the form tag. So let's make this a, let's say we want a label. For, this is a new part for you, but I'm gonna show you how to use it. For name, and we want to say this is name. So when we make our input, we can select a name for it, and it will correspond to the label. So when it's selecting for, it's gonna have automatic styling to make it look as if it's a label for this tag. So that's really helpful. let's add a placeholder for it. If you remember, that's that gray placeholder text. And let's say, what? John Doe. And let's set it to be required. So if we actually went to button, set our submit type at the bottom, it's always at the bottom of the form. We try to submit this. By default, HTML has those pop-ups say, hey, fill out this field, because we set it as required. That's all we had to do. Min length, let's say 2. Let's try to submit it with 1. Look at that automatic validation there, so that nobody's submitting things that you don't want. We're just gonna leave that though. No min length, it's a name. You can usually do a max length, you'll see that. It's John Doe. Let's add another input with type equal to email, and right off the bat you'll see this one. Let's set this to also be required, and let's set the placeholder to John Doe at email.com. And if you see this here, if we try to submit something without the blank.com, it's because we set it as a type of email. It's by default. Let's fill that out. It's gonna say, hey, this isn't an email, and that's the very basic validation of the input. Soon when you get into like things like React, you'll have libraries where you can do like advanced validation, but right now that's not required. And let's add a big text area. The text area tag adds a big brick of text that you can type into, kind of like a message field. And let me pull this up on W3 Schools. I thought more people would be watching this by now today, but appreciate you sticking around. So we're gonna add our text area. We want to add a property. Not yet. This one can actually close itself, just like that. I thought, what is going on? I guess not. I guess you really do have to. Yeah, so you do have to put a second one, even though you wouldn't usually put anything in here. That's just, why would you want that? But it's alright. We can delete that. We can, pretty sure you can select a placeholder of let us know what is on your mind. Okay, and this is kind of ugly, so we're gonna maybe add a little subtitle that says get in touch with us or something like that. And let's add that line I said earlier, the HR. That's gonna add that nice little divider. It seems kind of dumb to use that. You're like, okay, well, it's that easy to make a divider, but it's actually used pretty commonly, and you can style it however you want it. It's not that big of a deal. As you can see, it makes a border. So the fill right now is actually like this transparent type fill, and it's like a indent, but we want to set the background color to just a basic black color. You want the whole thing to be black. And we're going to show you, I'm going to show you some styling techniques for these boxes, make them not so bricky, etc. So let's take that label again, set it here, label for email. Let's set the label to be email, And remember, to make the HTML4 or the 4 tag, you're gonna have to add a name for it. So let's name it the same name as the 4. It's gonna set it next to that. And let's grab it one last time for our text area. Label for message. And let's name this field message. Let's add a name equal to message. Same thing as our 4. Cool. If we remove that, not sure it'll make much difference right now because of our layout. Obviously, I didn't change anything, but when you have more advanced layouts, it will default to a certain way. So I think we can start styling this a little bit. So let's take this, and if we remember, it was contact container. So let's select our hashtag contact container because it's a ID. And let's say we want to select that P because I think it would be cool to set it to gray, kind of a subtitle. And usually subtitles have a little bit smaller font size, so let's try 14 pixels. Maybe even smaller, 12 pixels. Looks good. And if we take our margin away, no. By default, those big H1s have a margin default font weight, so let's set the font weight to maybe a 500. Doesn't need to be so strong. H1, maybe a 4. That's nice, but again, it's a header, so I think I'm gonna leave it at 500. And let's set this one to a 400. Let's also make sure there's no margin on the H1, so that's gonna give it a little bit less of a margin around it. And I think it might have default padding. No, okay, that's fine. So look at that. So we got our header going on. So let's select our HR here, contact container, and we're selecting the HR inside of it. So we want the background of this HR to be black, and I'll zoom in before I save it. Oh, sorry. Color. No? Huh. Maybe it's been a while since I've used an HR. Let me debug this real quick. And, you know, nobody's perfect. I have to look up a lot of things a lot of different times, but that's okay. That's part of the learning process, so don't worry about it. They are the same. Let's set a height to it of 10 pixels and see if that changes anything. So this will tell us, yep, so we are definitely selecting it. Set a background for it. There we go. And see, it has that weird gray border. We don't really want that, and we want this to be a little bit less. 1 pixel. Now let's take away that border. So let's just set border to none. So right now we just have our line. That may be a little bit strong, so we can always set it to a gray or a light gray, maybe. No, to dark gray. I'm very indecisive. Set it back to black. We can, after setting our border to none, we can override what we said. Say we do want a border radius though of 5 pixels or 50 pixels or 50%. See that? So it's trying to round it out, but it's so small that there's not much going on yet. See, but it's trying to, whenever you do 50%, it tries to do a circle. This, you'll see in our inputs in a second. It's rounding the border of it. I think it's set to like 2 maybe. Still have that rounded border, as you can see. So let's select our contact. We can just select a form because we only have one. So inside of our form, what do we have? We have labels, inputs, buttons, and a text area. So I think to start off, let's make this whole thing a flex. So right off the bat, you can see it tries to put everything on one line because the default layout of a flex container is a row, but we can say flex direction column, and that puts them all like that. And we want to justify the content to have space evenly, but we also have to set a height of 100% or whatever you want it to be. But see, nothing really happened. So if you put a border to it, look at that, there's nowhere to space it out because it's so small. It's just containing what we have. And as you can see, it's also trying to make the button the entire size. So we're gonna edit that in a second. So if we take this, let's find the parent. So contact container, yeah, there's no height to it, so it's just containing what's inside of it. So if we set a height of 250 pixels, oh, wrong selector, that selected the H1. So we add a height of 250 pixels. Look at that, now they're starting to become spacing. There's room to grow. More room. I think that might be about good. So everything's spaced evenly now in a column in a flex container. So that's nice. Everything's on their own line. So whenever you do a flex column, it makes everything put on their own line. So let's edit these inputs real quick. So we're going to select the inputs inside the form. We're going to set a border radius of 5 pixels. And I'm just going to reset the border on this so there's no default styles. We're going to set the border to none. And we're going to set, then we're going to re-put it 1 pixel solid black. Forgot my semicolon. And that's very rounded, as you can see. So you might want to bring it down a little bit, maybe 2 pixels, just 3 pixels, just a slight round to it, so you can see. But when we type in here, the text is very next to each other. So we're gonna add a padding to it of 2%. Look at that. So now things are gonna be a little bit more padding. It's a little bit big though, so you can set it to like 1.25%. And there's a default font on these text areas, and we'll take care of that in a second. You can also do the same thing you can do with paragraphs, H1s. You can set the font family and the font weight of text inputs as well, so don't worry about that. So let's go to our message here. So let's select, that was inside of the form text area. And let's say we want to make sure the color is black, if it isn't already. Pretty sure it was. We want a height of 100 pixels. Maybe less, because that's a little bit cutting it close. But if you noticed, by default, text areas can be redefined. And we don't want that at all. So, if we go to W3 schools, I do this a lot for tags that I don't normally use. W3 schools, text area, no resize. So something that you'll learn at Lambda is, if one of the most important skills is knowing how to find an answer. It's not how you got the answer, It's more how you get to the answer. If you need to read documentation, that's fine. That's not cheating. You're learning the documentation for something. So don't feel like you're cheating or you're making it worse for yourself if you tried, or if you have to constantly look at a documentation, because eventually the more you look at that, it might help you out more than the people who aren't looking at the documentation and trying to wing it. I think about how long I've been doing HTML and I still have to look it up. Obviously not everything, but things like this I don't really ever use text areas, not very often. So as you can see, you select the text area and you set resize to none, and it shows you examples. And this is really good too for all these tags. It shows you all the little different properties you can put in there, but we're just focusing on resize, so we're going to set the resize to none. And just 1 second. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. See, so resize, no longer able to resize that. We don't want them to, and now they can't. So let's set this a little bit less. We want a little bit more spacing in here. And let's say it's very odd, but that's okay. Let's give it a width of 100% of the container. And was our form align item center. We can do that too, but obviously that is very extremely ugly. So let's set our content container to be a little bit taller, because we're starting to get a little bit less room going on, and we want all the room we need. We don't want to be trying to work for it here. See, so if you notice, our height is no longer working, and neither is our width. If you set our width to 10 pixels, nothing happens. And that's because if we go back to the text area tag, you need to set the columns available and the rows. See? So if we go back over to contact, text area, and this is another property, calls. So these are the columns. So let's say 10 columns. And let's set our rows to 10. Maybe even 20. So that's going to be making more and more rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think for this, maybe 5 might be okay. And for columns, we can just set that to the default, I think. Yep, so the columns won't matter because we're already making this 100%. Look at that. See, and so back to the responsive, we'll definitely have to change some things, but for now this is fine. And again, notice the font's kind of ugly looking in there. So we're gonna go back to our styles. We're gonna grab that font family declaration and set that in here. Look at that, now it's back to normal. And we also want to add a little bit of letter spacing, maybe of 2 pixels. See, so now it's more of the letter spacing there, but that's starting to look quite weird. So 1 pixel, just fine. And if you actually look at this, we don't want... Well, actually, our line height is looking pretty nice, so I don't think we have to change that. But next, to tackle the button, button. I know so many people who say button. It's crazy. So button. So we don't want this to take up that entire width. That looks extremely weird. So let's say maybe 50%, maybe even less. 30% of this. This would be 100%, so 30% of that. Let's add a padding to it of like 1%. Text isn't right up on the border of it. Let's set the background to what? Black. Let's make it so it does not have any border. And let's set the color to white. That's our button. And remember what I said with the border radius? We can say 5 pixels. That's gonna round that button out a little bit. So look at that, we have a complete contact form here. Just like that. So what I want to go on to next is basically a form, a hover, and these are called pseudo classes. So if we take button, and remember this can also be a class, or it can be a ID of certain things, but right now we only have one button, so I'm just selecting button. You want your dot, your colon, that's going to initialize the semicolon or the pseudo selector, and then you want to say hover. So right now we're doing a hover. So these are all, anything inside these brackets are going to be what we want to do when we hover. So let's say we want to set the background color to white, the color to black, and the width to 50%. Look at that. So it's setting it to white, changing the color to black, making the width 50%. So let's say we also want to add a border, 1 pixel solid black. Like that. But that looks really ugly. But we do have a working hover effect. So if you want to do more of a smoother, you can just go to the declaration of the original button without the hover, and you can say 1 second. This is going to be very long, as you can see. And it's actually, I took a UX design course, and it says that, research says that between it's usually about 0.3 seconds is really good. You don't want to slow down the user. So let's say 0.3. Look at that. Very fast. So if you personally feel like that, you can always change it. And let's say we also want to make sure the user knows that it's a button. This will be changing it to a cursor. So just like, you know, anything, you know, on click, you know, let's do this. Just like that, on hover, we want to apply these styles to it and override these. But as soon as hover is gone, it's going to default back to whatever you originally put. So it's going back to my normal styles. Just like that. And we put a transition in there to make sure. And there isn't transition names like ease in. That's gonna like change the curve of your animation, but you can always get into that later. Animations aren't the biggest deal, and I think that might be going out a little bit too far, so this might be smoother. And let's say 2 seconds. Too slow or too fast. You just don't want anything to be too choppy. So we have our submit and our basic validation, and we forgot to make this text area required. So we don't want people submitting without actually putting a message. That's just gonna spam us. So if we go back to our index, take that footer again, place that down here. Oof. So we can make a footer. We can add an ID this time of contact footer. Let's select it. Contact footer. We just want to target the one on the contact page. We want to set the margin top to 50 pixels, 100 pixels, whatever we want. Put our footer right down there. So we have our home page and our about page. Oh, whoops, I never selected, contact page. That's our contact, our home. As you can see, we're going to those .html files that we have in our folder structure here. So let's say we want to use icons, and so like we did before, you can always do these, but there is a library that is very common for HTML. So let's go to Font Awesome. You might have heard this before, but if you make an account, after you make an account, you can go to Kits, make a kit, and see there's a script here, and it says place inside of your header. So you copy that, and that's going to include your specific ID, or kit ID, as you can see. So you're going to come over here, and it said put it inside of the header. Oh, I never copied it. Whoops. So now we have a font, or icons. Well, let's make sure it's both in both documents, so we can have both pages use icons. And nothing happened, obviously, but if you go to search for an icon, let's say a user. Let's make a new section on our HTML index. So right under here, let's make a new section. And let's call this one, let's give it an ID of perks. Basically, we're gonna make a perks section. Nice little layout here. So let's grab this one, and let's copy that. So this would be the tag you would put in there. So if you go back, it should already be there. It's right there. But what we're gonna do is make kind of a nice little perk section here. So let's add a header for it. We're gonna say perks. And what did we use before? So we're gonna redo the styling for that. And we're gonna start adding 3 sections here. So we want this to be a flex container here. So we're gonna add a class to it. We're gonna say perks container. So we want that to also be its own flex box with divs inside of it. So we're gonna take that icon class along with a short paragraph, lorem 10, like 10 characters, just like that. And let's copy each of those. 1, 2, 3. Very ugly, obviously. And let's kind of switch it up a little, like lorem 15. And lorem 8 characters for that one, just to get a little bit of adjustment and sizing. So let's go to our styles, and remember we named it perks container, but let's change up the icon. So let's say money icon, say low. This one's nice, so we'll grab that one. That one's kind of saying like low affordable prices. We can actually just type that in. Let's say wonderful customers and wait staff, right? This is a coffee shop, so I'll say baristas. Again, you can just leave it as default text, but just customize it a little bit. Low, affordable prices. And the last one we can do great original coffee. Which, I mean, it might just be me, but I personally feel coffee is all the same. Let's see if there's a coffee icon. So, sorry about that. So we can choose to use a coffee cup or beans. Beans might be cool, but I doubt they have beans. Nope, burritos. That's okay. We'll grab our coffee. Just grab a solid one. Just grab that. We'll change that last one to coffee cup. And look at that, we got our 3 icons. Close that out. Now let's get into those styles. So, perks container. So we're gonna start with perks. ID of perks. We want that to be a flex container. By default, remember it tries to put your 2 sections in a row. So we're gonna change that to flex direction of column. Back to our column layout. So if we now select, we go back, we can close that out now. If we go back and we select perks container and its class, so we want our dot perks container dot because it's a class. We want that to be its own layout as well. So look at that. So it's now in a row. Flex Grove 1, I think it was. Oh. Flex basis 1. No. It's alright. Let's justify our content to be space evenly. And maybe select text align center. It's very weird. Maybe not a text align center. So this is where you'd have to make the choice on what type of layout you want. I guess we could do a so maybe that isn't the best choice for us. So let's maybe make another column. And let's justify that content to be in the center and align the items to the center. Text line center as well. So now we have a completely centered column. Let's space it evenly. And let's make the perks container have a height of 100 or 300 pixels. Maybe even 350. Space around, maybe, or a space between. And that doesn't look bad. So let's take this text align also to the center. So we want the whole thing to be text line. Since we're inheriting the text line, we don't have to declare it twice. That's just an extra line. So what we can do is we can take our all the I classes, or the all the I tags inside of the perks container. Let's make them our signature color.
How long goes today, bud?
So let's take our color. And let's get that going. Sorry if you guys hear people coming in and out. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. Okay. So let's make it all those color. Let's also try to change the font size to maybe 16 pixels. Maybe bigger. 30 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. A little bit bigger. That's nice. And let's try to see what this might look like. Background color of black, maybe. And we could change all the color inside that to white by default. And if we go back, what did we make that? We made it an H2. So if we select the H2 inside of the perks, let's change the color. The color's already fine, I think. But let's make it like a little bit nice design here. Let's say 2 pixel letter spacing, maybe even 5 pixels. Make it nice, cool. And text transform. So this is where you can do like capitalize. So it'll capitalize the first letter, or you could do uppercase, which is what we want. And that will make that nice spaced heading, modern looking design that we're going for. Set it for like a font weight of 500. Nice. And if we go back and we grab a perks container, all the P elements, let's set those to 400 font weight, so they're a little bit not as prominent. And maybe a font size of 16 pixels or even less. Perfect. So look at that. We have our icons in there. That looks great. I might have messed up by going for the black route, but that's alright. So we have a working website, and look at that. Contact. We got our contact. Look at some forms, and we got some tags and links and icons and images. So I am going to go on GitHub, and I'm going to do a quick demonstration before we go of how to upload this. And I'm going to drop this link in the description so you can fork this and or download it for yourself to play around in. So we're going to say coffee shop YouTube. So you can create it. We did do all the work before, so we never ended up committing or anything like that. But if you open up the command, so it's control, and it's this little guy right here, just one of those. So if you do control and then that, it'll open that up automatically. Same with closing it, just like that. So we can say git add, and it should tell you this, that no, it's not a git repo at all. So what you have to do is you have to be in the root, and you have to say git initialize. So you can see now it should show this little master branch, and it's going to be counting anything that's inside this folder right here, HTML CSS practice. So if we list everything in here, those are all the things we're going to be uploading. So we can say git add period. With the period, that means it's going to take everything in your folder, everything, unless you had a .git ignore file. .git ignore. If you have this, and you said images, that's counting as the entire folder images. If you wanted to say just style.css, you would put the extension on the end. So when you actually push it to GitHub, this will be kept on your machine, but will never go online. So that type of stuff is helpful for if you have a lot of packages that need to be downloaded, or you have like a ton of images. You can just host them somewhere else for people to use instead of uploading them all to GitHub. So we're gonna add period, which means add all of them. Get status. So this shows our new status of our repo, all these new files, and it'll also show deletions or anything like that. So after you git add, you can say git commit dash m for message, and then quotes, coffee shop done, end quote, enter. So that's going to be a commit. It's going to show what you changed, your commit message. So if you git push, it's going to tell you you need to add the URL to this. So what you can do is you can just grab that, shift, insert, or right click paste, just like that. So but we want to clear up the screen a little bit. So you can type clear and it'll go back up. It'll make that the top. So you copy this. It is git remote add origin. If we just take our link to it, and I swear, I mean, I've been doing this for a while and I still can't remember git remote add origin, you know, so don't worry about it. But it is shift insert. Oh. Wait. Push. We already added a remote. I must have already done that. So you would usually do that and it would say okay. And then next you would say another shift insert for the git push origin master. And this is all just copy paste from your git repo when you make it. So there we go. It should say it pushed successfully. If you refresh your GitHub, there it is. And then there is your commit message. If you go to commits, coffee shop done. And let's say we added a readme dot markdown, and we said our coffee shop landing page. You can go to git status. Look at that. Untracked file. If we pushed, this was never added to our git. So we gotta say git add all git commit dash, or if you check the git status again, yep, there's the new file. So git commit dash message quote added readme, could be our message. And then finally, from now on, after you've already set up the origin, you can just say git push. If you go to here now that it's done, added a readme. And if you go here, it's going to show you what changed. Oh, a new file called readme added a new line. If we look back at this one, we can see what we added. We added all these lines here. And when you start committing and changing files, like we didn't change a file, but if we changed index and pushed it, you'd see deletions of what lines you were deleting and stuff like that. So it's nice. I'm going to put this in the chat before I go. So if you want to fork that, you would just come to the link, click fork, and then click clone or download zip. Either one, you can test it out. Alright, well, thanks for everyone who watched. I don't think many people did, but that's alright. I had a lot of fun, so I will see you guys